Hello, my name is Vittoria Marini, accredited VA claims agent, and I'm here with VA-Accredited Attorney Courtney Ross and Daniel Marusak. And we're here today to talk about service connection. So Courtney, what is service connection and why might a veteran want to claim for it?
Yeah, so service connection in the most general sense essentially means that facts and evidence show that a veteran's disability is due to their time in service through one theory or another of service connection, which we're going to get into. And a veteran would want service connection for a condition because it means that they'll be compensated by VA for that disability.
Absolutely. And one of the important things to think about for service connection is that if it is granted, it will be based on a review of the entire claims file that a veteran might have. So, Mr. Marusak, what is direct service connection? We have 4 different types of service connection that we're going to talk about today, and direct service connection is one of them.
Yeah, direct service connection is probably the most common one that we see. And that's when a veteran has a diagnosed condition that is related to service in some way. So there's usually 3 elements: current diagnosed condition, an in-service injury or event, and then a medical nexus linking the injury to the current diagnosis.
Absolutely. So an example of that might be a veteran has a fall that happens during boot camp or some other point during active duty, and that then leads to a chronic back disability that they might have, has a current diagnosis of that, and we can link that and show that the current disability that a veteran might have is from that first back disability and injury that happened in service. What are some other types of service connection that we might see as well?
Yeah, so another theory is secondary service connection. And essentially, it's when a disability is related to an already service-connected condition. So a veteran might have a back disability. They're already being compensated by VA for that disability. VA's conceded it's due to their time in service. And as a result of that back condition, the veteran has developed another disability or another condition they have has been aggravated in some way by the back condition. So a good example that we see frequently is the development of depression or a psychiatric condition because of the effects of a back or an orthopedic condition that's already service-connected and how it's impacted the veteran's life. So essentially, it's another condition that's the result of or proximately due to a service-connected condition.
Yeah.
Back's a good example because you have radiculopathies, that hip injuries or other lower body injuries that result from back disability as well. So
absolutely. And how closely related exactly do those 2 disabilities have to be? You mentioned the term proximately due to, so that doesn't sound like it has to be a direct causation.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be a direct causal link. The standard, like anything else when you're establishing VA benefits, is to show that it's at least as likely as not there's a proximate relationship between those 2.
Definitely. So there is another type of service connection, our 3rd type of service connection, which is presumptive service connection. So Mr. Marusak, what is presumptive service connection and what veterans might qualify for it?
So presumptive service connection is basically a way to get service connection where VA establishes exposure to different chemicals, or basically allows the veteran to skip the in-service event if they're able to show that they were in a certain location at a certain time. But they still need to show that they have a current disability, but the medical nexus related to that location and the exposure is basically granted by VA. So if the veteran has the appropriate service, the right location, and the current disability or the current condition, then service connection can be granted. The most common one we see is for Vietnam veterans, boots on the ground in Vietnam with Agent Orange exposure. There's a number of conditions such as diabetes and peripheral neuropathies and things like that that can be related to the Agent Orange.
Definitely.
Cancers as well.
Are there any other type of veterans that might require presumptive service connection as well?
They're generally adding to the list. So Camp Lejeune is a recent one. Gulf War, Persian Gulf War, radiation exposure, and probably just a couple, but
The PACT Act.
The PACT Act.
Recent one back in 2022.
Right.
Presumption. conditions and locations.
There's timed in veterans as well are included as part of the Asian origin tow year.
Right. And the important thing that makes this different from the other two that we've talked about is that a nexus is not required. It's just the in-service location and the diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
So there is one other sort of less common service connection theory that we do see. It's the aggravation theory. So under what circumstances might a veteran be granted service connection for aggravation? Courtney?
Yeah, I mentioned aggravation by a service-connected condition before. So here, I think we mean aggravation by their time in service.
Yes.
So a veteran might have a disability that they were suffering from prior to during service. I'll stick with my back example. Maybe they had a back condition that was asymptomatic prior to service. As a result of their time in service, maybe they suffered another injury, or maybe it was just because of the physical requirements of their time in service, that condition worsened beyond its natural progression during their time in service. If the evidence can establish that, then that's a theory of service connection that you could use to get that granted to show us aggravated by the time of service.
Absolutely. So in some circumstances, as we know, veterans will undergo an entrance examination prior to their active duty service. So they can still get service connection if something is listed on that entrance exam.
Correct. Yes. You'd have to show again that that condition, if it was listed on entrance exam, was in fact aggravated beyond its natural progression because of their time in service.
Yes.
And getting service connection granted on that theory affects the way that you're rated down the line, because VA will attempt to determine what the baseline severity, so the severity of your condition prior to entering services, and then reduce your current disability by that amount. So they determine that your back injury was rateable at 10% in high school before you enter the military. It's now at 40%. They're going to subtract 10 from 40. It will end up with 30% rating. So something to keep in mind on the aggravation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that kind of brings up the question of what exactly is a nexus, because we have talked about that in a few of our service connection theories. And we know that it's an element that's present in most of them. So what exactly is a nexus and why is it important? What sort of evidence would a client need in order to show that the nexus is established?
So the nexus is the link between the current diagnosed condition and either service or the already service-connected condition, depending on the theory you're working with. And most of the time, what VA requires is a medical nexus. So a medical opinion, it can be from a private treatment provider. It can oftentimes be by a VA examiner at a C&P examination that basically provides that opinion and says, this condition is due to their time in service or due to this already service-connected condition. It can, in certain circumstances, also be satisfied with lay testimony, but there's a lot of nuances to it, and it's much more difficult to do it with just lay testimony. The majority of the time, it's going to be a medical nexus that's required.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in those cases, you're usually talking about continuity of symptoms where a veteran has an injury in service, their symptoms start in service, they continue to have those symptoms throughout service, or after service, and they're trying to get service connection later. So they might have a spouse or a family member testify to their continued symptoms post-service. So that's probably the only time that lay testimony would be helpful for the nexus element.
Yeah. So most of the time, the best thing to do is to get a nexus from a medical professional. All right. Well, that is all that we had for today. Thank you both for your time. I think this was very informative. If you would like more information about service connection or any other information about VA law in general, feel free to subscribe to all of our social media platforms, or reach out to us if you'd like a review of your case.